Hello, everyone. Welcome. So we'll get started in about 45 seconds or so. We'll just let a few more people. Hello from Moose Jaw. How's Moose Jaw's weather today? Hi, Mavis. Hi, Randy. Beautiful. That's nice. It's nice here, too. Hi from Ottawa. I hear the weather broke there finally. Hi, Melissa. Hi, Florin. How are you today? Great. Okay. So we're going to get started. We're going to get started now. It's 2 o'clock. So hi, Jarrett from Edmonton. Nice to have you with us. Hope your weather's good there too. Wicked storm last night. Nice. Very nice, Lisa. Nice. Okay, so today I have two people joining me to help me with this presentation. So I'm pleased to welcome Don Mills, who's a physical education exercise specialist here at 17 Wing Winnipeg. And we also have Leona Bond, who is a fitness coordinator here at 17 Wing Winnipeg. And they're going to be doing most of the talking today. It's really their area of expertise, not really mine. So I'm going to let them take most of the air time. So just to get started, if you missed a session, if you might want to take a picture of this. These are the sessions that we've already had. So if you'd like to go back and look at the recordings because you missed them, here they are. So we're partway through. This is number 4. We have nine more to go, I believe. So before we get started, the presentation you're about to view is the intellectual property of the Department of National Defense. So any reproduction or retransmission of the slides contained in this presentation is strictly forbidden, unless I tell you you can take a picture of it. Some of the topics that are discussed in this webinar may be of a sensitive nature. I don't think this series is really of a sensitive nature. However, some of the information may not be appropriate to small children, especially when we talk about progressions for running or things like that. So just be aware that if you've got your children around you to be aware that some of the information that they may be hearing may not be appropriate for them. Please understand that people's stories are theirs alone to tell, and that anything that is shared by participants in this webinar is not to be discussed outside this webinar. And this webinar is being recorded, and it's going to be available for viewing later on the PSP YouTube channel. So although we want active participation, you can simply follow along without using the chat. And we will be using the chat box for our discussions. And I realize that the chat box does not come up in the recordings. So we'll try to verbalize most of the things that are in the chat box for everybody to hear if they're going to listen to this later. And hello, Chad. How is Sudbury? Hi, Leanne. All right, still raining here. Sorry to hear that. It will stop eventually. Okay. It's not really a picture, but yeah, it's a mural that my son made at the youth group. It's on a painting tarp. Hello, Lindsay from BC. Nice. That's a nice way to do a webinar, Randy, out in the yard. Cool. All right. So I will be turning off my my picture really soon, so you don't need to see me. And then you'll have Donnie and Leona to talk to you for the rest of the day. I apologize. It must be midweek or something. So
happens a lot.
One more thing before we get started, and I hand it over to these two. So there's a poll. So what I'd like to know is, what is your affiliation to the CAF community? So are you a serving member, a veteran, family member, an employee of the Department of National Defense or CFMWS? Are you an other? Oh, nice. We have a pretty good mix today. One veteran. Cool. And a family member, a couple others, military members. Very nice. Great. All right. So I'm going to say goodbye now and pass it over to Leona.
Thank you, Diane, and hi and welcome to everybody. So I guess what we're going to start off with when we're talking about running strategies is initially right now with just the basics of your strategy, including a warm-up and a cool-down. Because I know for a lot of people, when they're going out and starting running, you think, well, it's just running. Why do I need to warm up and why do I need to cool down? I can just get out and run. It's a very simple and basic exercise. But just like with any other activities, it is a good idea, and we would say a crucial idea, to do a warm up and a proper cool down when you're done. So we're just going to review what that should look like for you and what types of movements those might include. So actually, just to ask you guys quickly, if you guys are runners here or beginning a running program, do you do a dedicated warm up for your run? Whether that's your race or just your training run? Oh yeah, Lisa, good. No, okay.
Mavis. Bad Mavis.
Mavis is one of my staff. We'll chat. No. Okay, short one, mostly stretches. No, I'm terrible about that. Okay, well, this is a good conversation for us to have. So the thing about a warm-up for running, it doesn't necessarily need to be a very extensive one, depending on the type of workout or race that you're going to be doing. Wow, 15K a day. I never stretched before. Well, this might be applicable then to you, Jarrett, because sometimes when you're doing a run, if it is a longer run or a slower run and you're not going to be at a very high intensity for that run, it could be argued that simply starting out at a really light pace and maybe doing a few basic gentle movements during the initial few minutes of your run can sort of count as your warm-up. So if you're doing that, we might say in essence you're doing a little bit of a warm-up for it. But if you're going to be incorporating maybe some faster paces or different like interval training, or you're going to be doing some hills or different things in your run, we want to make sure that we are doing a warm-up. So how long should your warm-up be? Should be at least 5 to 8 minutes, and that's generally a good amount of time to make sure that you're going to prep your body properly for the workout that you're going to be doing. And it should include dynamic movements or dynamic stretches. So Chad, you said you do a short one, mostly stretches. So in the beginning of a run, if you're doing a held stretch position, we want to do that relatively briefly, if at all, but we should be including dynamic movements or involving motion for what we're doing. And we're going to be starting out with small movements and then gradually working into larger and larger movements until we're kind of maxed out on our range of motion. And what that's going to do is just kind of safely work us into freeing up our maximum range of motion. So that's available to us while we're in our workout, so that we're not going to be likely to get injured. I don't know if you guys can hear my dogs going off. Someone just came to the door. We want to remember, include movements from your full body, not just your legs. Yes, we're running. It's mainly a leg-driven movement, but we do have some accessory motion of the arms going on. And if I want to get my entire body warm, because my blood is circulating through my entire body as I'm working out, we're going to be using movements from our entire body to help us warm up. And then paying additional attention to any areas that might be previous injury or issues for you is important. So if you've had a hamstring tear, say, previously, and you've got a bit of scar tissue in there, you might know that you have to do a little bit more work to get that area properly prepped for your run. Same as maybe if you've had rolled an ankle or done something such as that previously, and that, okay, I've got to spend a little bit more time working on ankle mobility or range of motion there. So I do have a handout to share. So it should be available there for you guys. And what this is going to give you is just an example of some basic range of motion and preparation exercises that you can do as part of your warm-up. By no means is this an exhaustive list or maybe the best list or the best list for you. But if you're not doing anything right now, this is something that you can incorporate into your warm-up. And I didn't add any prescription to the handout as far as how many of each you should do. That might be dependent on how much time you have or the type of run that you're doing. But if you think of doing between 10 and 15 repetitions of each movement per leg or per side, or doing roughly 30 seconds of each, that'll get you through that 5 to 8 minute time frame for your warm-up. Last point on this slide, and I know I've been guilty of this in the past, especially when I've been in a race situation or I'm about to run an event. I think, okay, well, I don't want to do a warm-up because it feels like it's tiring me out a bit and I want to save my energy for my run, thinking that maybe it's going to rob me a little bit from my performance for my run. But a proper warm-up is actually essential to help you perform your best. So it's going to make sure that you've freed up all of your range of motion so you're able to run smooth or move smoothly through that full range of motion. You're not going to have any residual muscle tension you're going to be fighting against that might rob you of some of your energy from your run. It's going to make you able to sustain your proper form immediately and longer through your run. So you're going to be more comfortable and less fatigued through your entire race or event than if you hadn't warmed up. So if that's been your sort of mentality before, I challenge you. Oh, it does. Yes, that's a good point, Lisa. Having your warm up before is almost like helping you relax before your race. It's something that's very patterned and familiar, and that can help calm you down before your race. That's a really good point. Yeah. So if you tended to not do that with your race, I would challenge you, pick one of your training runs that you're doing that is maybe close to your race distance and effort. Do your full warm-up before that, and then see how you feel within that run. Do you feel like, yeah, that was a lot easier than I thought it was going to be? Yes, I was able to perform better through my entire run, and just see if you can find the value of doing that full and proper warm-up. Any questions about warm up or the handout from anyone? No? All right. Cooling down. So once you've finished your race, I know, especially if you've put a high exertion in and you're really fatigued and you think you crossed the finish line and I am done, that's it. Walk away, hit the shower, go home, or the same thing from your workout. We want to make sure we're doing a proper cool down. Just because your heart rate's elevated, your body temperature's elevated, your nervous system has just been very active, and we want to make sure that we're bringing everything back down to our pre-workout, our pre-race values slowly and appropriately. So after your race, you want to make sure that you keep moving and you walk around for 2 to 3 minutes, or perhaps more if you need it. So what you're just hoping to do is keep your muscles moving, because your heart's been beating quickly and it's trying to circulate blood and push it to the muscles that have been working. If you stop dead, those muscles are no longer working and moving, but your heart is still trying to send the blood to those muscles, and it can tend to pool in your extremities, and that's not a good thing, and that might make you potentially pass out or start to feel dizzy. So you want to make sure, keep walking around, keep those muscles engaged and moving, and keep that muscle contraction that's going to help drive that blood back to the heart and just circulate things while they slow down at an appropriate rate. The time required to cool down is going to be related to a few things: how hard you worked in your workout. So if I've done a really slow, long distance run, my heart rate's not been as high, so it's going to come down relatively quickly and I won't need as long a cool down period. Whereas if I've worked really hard, done some intervals or a shorter, quicker run, I might need more time for my cool down. It's also related to your level of training. So if you're more fit and your body's been adapted more to working hard and to putting in that effort, you will actually be more efficient at bringing that heart rate down more quickly. So if you're just starting out, you might need a longer cool down portion or your heart rate might take a little longer to come down to pre-workout values, that's okay. That'll improve as you go, but just be aware of that. Static stretches, this is now a good time to perform the static stretches towards the end of your cool down. So once your heart rates come down for a little bit, you might now be able to sit down or be in place and go through the stretches where you're putting in that sustained hold of 20 to 30 seconds for each of your major muscle groups. And then the last point, rehydrate and refuel. So depending on, again, the effort level or length of your run, simply water might be appropriate. If you've done a really long race or long run, so Jared, with your 15 kilometers a day, or maybe if you're working up to longer distances, you might reconsider something with more, some more calories, protein, carbohydrate balance, or some electrolytes in there if you need it.
Steph probably doesn't need to do any of that because he doesn't run, so.
Yeah. Donnie's taking a shot at a few of the instructors in the room here who are not fans of running. So pickle juice, not my drink of choice, Florian, but if that works for you, that's probably the most interesting recovery drink I've ever heard of so far. Oh, for electrolytes. Okay.
Yeah, I've heard more and more about pickle juice, and it's, yeah, Gatorade or whatever. That's what I would prefer, but pickle juice.
Yeah, my go-to might be more of a Gatorade, but same concept, right? If you've depleted stores in your body during your run of those electrolytes, of the calories, and just needing to rehydrate, that you're going to go and you're going to find a drink that'll fit that need for you based on how hard that you've worked. Awesome. Okay, I'm going to turn it over to Donnie now.
Okay. All right. So the next slide, new to running. So I guess this doesn't follow for Jarrett, who's in 15K, but this tends to be the difficulty about some of these presentations is the variety of experiences that you're talking to. Jarrett would be a prime example of someone who's very experienced, and maybe they can find little tidbits of information that might help with the running. Some who are starting brand new, maybe because of injuries, or maybe they just decided they wanted to do a change of lifestyle. This would be even more appropriate, just because we can start from the very basics, and you get questions like that all the time about how do I start? And with this slide, as you see, if you're new to running, we start slow, okay? Again, it says, limit durations of runs no more than 30 minutes 3 times a week. Limit frequency of the 30-minute runs to 3 times a week instead of 5 times a week. I think more than anything, it's telling people to be patient, okay? Temper your enthusiasm. Often when you get that light bulb and say, this is what I want to do, you often, and I'm guilty of this, you start running and you feel great the next day, you run again, and you feel great the next day, you run again, until I feel a little nagging thing, but I should loosen up. I'm going to go for another run. And then suddenly you've done 4 or 5 runs in a row, and then you start running into problems, whether it's musculoskeletal problems or just in general fatigue. So that's the piece of advice that we always give everybody is you have to have some patience with this. So if you run more, like Jared already does, if you're new, 3 times a week maximum to start. You can even start out at 2 times a week, but then you fill in the rest of the week with other activities. You can do other cardio activities such as riding a bike and swimming, etc., or going for walks, whatever the case is. But you don't have to run, knowing that running is extremely tough on the body. The amount of weight that you're putting on your lower body when you run is astronomical. I don't remember the numbers, but they're intense. So as I used to tell my people all the time, people say, I want to get fit fast. And I said, the fastest way to get fit is running almost all the activities. Problem is also the hardest on the body, so so Flora, you play soccer. I used to play soccer when I was young, and that's why I like to play games in my mind even and pretend I'm playing soccer. So that's why I do certain intervals and stuff. It's just, to me, it makes it a little bit more enjoyable. But absolutely, running on concrete is really tough on the joints. I'm a prime example of that. I used to run at least 5 times a week, about 5K every time, but it caught up to me, and injuries, and then problems with the feet, plantar fasciitis, iliotibial band problems with my lower back. It's tough. And then when you're dealing with injuries, it's even harder to get back to where you want to be. So that's why I say and you're right, Lisa, trail runs is the nice, softer ground that you're running on. It has its negatives with a lot of trail runs. You might twist an ankle, but to me, it's a lot more enjoyable. I enjoy trail runs, so absolutely. So, like it says, if you were doing other weight-bearing activities that day, you need to almost plan your day. If you're going to do some other stuff, then maybe shorter runs, or choose your other activities on another day when you're not as fatigued. Okay. Before I go on any further, or any questions so far with this? And I apologize if I start running on. I warned Leona. Well, Leona knows me well, and I told Diane too that I tend to get an idea in my head and then go on about it, and then forget about that. It's 10 minutes into what I just finished saying, and I went off on a tangent. So hopefully, no tangents. No.
I think this is just an aside. When Johnny was mentioning about the impact of running and it being hard on you, I think I recall the statistic, and I hope this is correct, that it was like for every impact when you're running, it was like 3 times your body weight impact versus walking, which is a lot less. So there is a lot of stress that goes through your body with running with every impact. And then think of that on concrete for how many footfalls for a run. So that is a lot of impact. So considering how many repeated impacts you have during your run, adding in those recovery or rest days, so the 3 times a week instead of 5, and considering your other activities, very critical.
Yeah, Jarrett too is, I feel like I should slow down on the frequency. I'm just trying to get my cardio up before basic. Absolutely. And that's where you have to almost have a plan, and writing this plan down in a week gives you a much better idea on when you're going too much or too little. I could almost tell you that you can never go too little. It's if you're running about 3 times a week, that's still going to give you a phenomenal cardio base and keep you strong for running. So there are, as they say, for trainers, a good trainer, should have lots of science, but the best trainers, it's an art form, and it's to be able to figure out what's best for the individual. So that's really what it's all about. Is everybody is different. Everybody has different goals and your different body types, different experiences, different environments to run in or not run in. So, but this is what we're going to try to do, is answer some of the basic questions too. Absolutely, cycling would be a perfect alternative to the non-run days. Like I said, it's if you do running Monday, Wednesday, Friday, then your Tuesday, Thursday, Saturday, Sunday, something else besides running, besides the impact. Okay, so we look at running with people of similar abilities. It's actually a really interesting slide. There's only 3 points, but I could talk about this forever. Trying to find motivation. The reason it's best to run with a partner. One of the things that I use this as example quite often with clients that I work with is JTF2 when they come in, and some of you may not be familiar with who they are, but there are elite anti-terrorism fighting force special ops. And when they come from base to base and look for recruitment, these people often look into the audience and ask them to put up their hand to see, are they following a program or are they just randomly running and exercising? And then what they do is then they bring up the idea is, how many of you are working with a partner? And it's a scattering of responses, but they told people that the majority of their success rates are due to members working out with a partner. Okay, so running with a partner helps with motivation, avoids skipping a workout. What it also provides accountability. So when you don't feel like going for your run, but you have a partner who's coming, they make a quick phone call, or a dog, absolutely. Leona does that all the time. You know, it's a great way of motivating, because you have to take the dog for a walk or a run, might as well go with them. So it's great a motivation for that. See, Chad, I recently started doing Pilates, decreased my time. Interesting. You know, it probably had increased not only your muscle endurance, but your range of motion. All that could be easily understood why it's improved. That's awesome. That's awesome. If you don't have a partner, run with music. I have just seen a few studies on the web about how music does prove to improve performance. Whether it's the fast music that you enjoy. So if you're into death metal, then great. You know, but whatever, you know, hard rock, whatever you enjoy doing at a fast pace will affect your performance. And that means you'll be running faster, or you'll be your running times will be faster, and your delays in fatigue increase. So you're not going to feel as tired. So those are just some of the little tricks that you can do to help you get through a run. Some days you just don't have it, and that's okay. But if you are saying, I got to go hard for this one song that's 4 minutes, 5 minutes long, hopefully it's not, Stairway to Heaven or something, 15 minutes long, but you can go hard for 5 minutes and say, okay, I'm going to stop, or I'm going to be done at the end of this song. That gives you some motivation to get through that 5 minutes. And in no time, that 5 minutes, because it's an enjoyable song, that 5 minutes is done. So just a little bit of advice for helping you with that motivation. Does anybody else have any kind of motivation that they use?
Florence says maybe you can sing at the same time. You wouldn't want me to be singing while I'm running. Not happening.
Yeah. The only people hear me sing is in the shower, myself. That's it.
I'm too winded to sing too when I'm running, that's for sure.
Little Foo Fighters or something, Focus on the moment and don't think about the finish. Absolutely. It's a mind game. It really is. Save singing for your long run. Yeah, when you got to go slow. When you got to go slow and keep your heart rate down, a lot easier to sing. but yeah, it's trying to any kind of a race, any kind of a big goal like our RCAF run. When I do a 10K run, that 10K is tough and it weighs on me. But I've learned over the years. I've been doing this for a lot of years. I won't tell you. I've been with PSP for 23 years, so I'll say that I have learned to accept that I can't run like I used to. You know, so if I have to walk, I walk. But you know, so it all depends on whatever your goal is. Okay. Let's see. Does anybody have the handout? There's a handout that I have, and maybe there we go. It's a 24-week run progression. It's something I developed about 2 years ago for my clients who are injured, and I got to get them back into, because that's what their goal is, cardio / jogging program. So you can, if you take a look at that, that'll give you an idea of your how to progress, your running strategies. Okay, where in this case here it says start with a ratio of a 1 minute walk, 1 minute run. That can be your fitness level and your minute, but then you may have to require 3 minutes to catch your breath. That's fine, but that's your starting point. Okay, where they talk about progress in 2 to 4 weeks to 1 minute walk. Usually, I bump up in intensity. Okay, so again, everybody is different. Progress every 2 weeks until the 1 minute walk becomes a 5 to 10 minute run. And that's why writing down in a workout diary is a invaluable tool. And I recommend that all the time to my clients, is to write down what you do so that you know that you don't go too much the next day or the next time you do your session, or it's a little snapshot of your progression, and it helps a ton. Okay, whether it's in weight rooms or your cardio sessions. Okay, so are there any questions so far about that? So what we're going to do now is start talking about progressing. And I think that's where a lot of people are confused. Like once you get going, then when do I turn it up? When do I go faster? When do I go farther? When do I go, it's great questions. Okay. It's a simple answer. The simple answer is once you feel comfortable at several sessions, then it's time to make it a little bit uncomfortable, right? So whether or not that's 1 week, 2 weeks, or 3 weeks, I usually, again, I'm a little more conservative with my clients, so I usually give them 2 weeks. 2 weeks before you then turn up the notch, okay? You make it a little bit more intense, okay? So you start out at a 1 minute walk, 1 minute run, 1 minute walk, 1 minute run. You do that, say 5 sets of that. And that might be your run for the day, plus your 5 minute warm up and your little bit of a 5 minute cool down. Great workout right there. But that's the start. Okay. once you can do about 3 good runs in a row, and I don't mean Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, I mean Monday, Wednesday, Friday, or in your week, then, and you feel comfortable after it. You know, it may have been tiring, but you're not sore the next day. You're not stiff and sore the next day. That starts to become a good sign to say, all right, now it's time to step it up a notch again. Okay. When it comes to running, especially, there used to be, it's not so much running, but in the fitness industry, they talk about you progress by the 10% rule. Well, when it comes to running and you're using time or distance as your indicator, mostly time, that's kind of thrown out the window. If you're doing a 1 minute, if you're doing a 1 minute run and you increase it by 10%, what's that, 1.1 minute? So, so it's what we often will say is about 20%. So you go from, say, a 1 minute to 2 minutes to 3 minutes and so on. And once you hit about 3 minutes, then you start trying to push yourself into a full a steady run of, say, 5 minutes or 10 minutes. Okay. So when you talk about how to progress, can anybody give me an example of any three? I have 3 ideas of how you can progress in your running or your cardio. Okay, hit intervals, absolutely. So intervals, absolutely. Melissa, distance. And Lisa, absolutely. Time, duration. Okay, that's how I explain to my clients on how to increase your intensity. If you're running 5K and I say, okay, now I want you to go up to 6K, that's increasing intensity. Gold stars for everybody. Yeah, and I often will do distance or time. That's why I will use for my gauge of when to progress. Okay, when I feel I'm strong enough and I'm fit enough and I'm not sore anymore, I'll increase the distance. Okay. And like I said, in the handout, for an example, the going on the 8th week, so the second page, you go slow and easy, continuous for 10 minutes. Then you do moderate intervals. So when Jarrett said high intensity intervals, absolutely. But when I progress, I usually recommend not high intensity yet, but more moderate intensity. So, and when I say what's the difference between high intensity and moderate intensity or low intensity, that's all a personal thing as well, right? I usually tell them all about the RPE scale. It's called the rate of perceived exertion. I'm not sure how many people are familiar with that term. There are a few people at least familiar with the RPE scale. Mavis is, yeah, good. Lisa, no. Floor, no. Melissa, yes. Awesome. Chad, yes. Lindsay, yes. Jarrett, no. Okay. Awesome. Okay. Well, this could easily again be something I could spend an hour talking about. RPE is a rate of perceived exertion. There's usually 2 kinds of scales. One's usually, the easiest one to know is 1 to 10. 1 is the effort it takes for you to crawl out of bed, basically. Okay, that's a 1 out of 10. 10 out of 10 is as fast a sprint as you could possibly do, and for as long as you can. That's a 10 out of 10 intensity. So what you do is you talk about a moderate or low intensity tends to be about a 5. 1 to 10 tends to be a 10. 10 to 12 tends to be a 15. 15 to 20 tends to be a 20. 20 to 30 tends to be a 30. 30 to 40 tends to be a 40. 40 to 50 tends to be a 50. 50 to 60 tends to be a 60. 60 to 70 tends to be a 70. 70 to 80 tends to be a 70. 80 to 90 tends to be a 90. 90 to 100 tends to be a 100. 100 to 200 tends to be a 200. 200 to 400 tends to be a 400. 400 to 500 tends to be a 500. 500 to 600 tends to be a 600. 600 to 700 tends to be a 700. 700 to 800 tends to be a 800. 800 to 900 tends to be a 900. 900 to 1000 tends to be a 1000. 1000 to 2000 tends to be a 1000. 1000 to 5000 tends to be a 1000. 1000 to 10000 tends to maybe a 6 out of 10 intensity. So as you're running, you're saying to yourself, because it's your own perceived exertion and how hard am I working? And what you say is, I'm working at a 5 out of 10 or a 6 out of 10. Then you say, all right, I'm working in that perfect zone for a slow, easy run. If it's your day to do a more moderate intensity, then if you can say to yourself, I'm working a 7, maybe an 8 out of 10 on a scale of 1 to 10, then you're in a moderate zone. Okay, you're starting to breathe a lot heavier. You probably can't hold a conversation with your partner. Okay, but that's a moderate intensity. Now, when we start getting into high intensity intervals, there's no talking allowed or capable. So you're running at about an 8 or a 9 out of 10. Okay, so that's how you decide how hard you're working. If you are supposed to do a long, slow workout run, and you're at an 8 out of 10, and you can honestly say to yourself, yeah, I'm at an 8 out of 10, then you got to slow down. You slow down or walk, okay? Because it's too hard. It's the harder you work out, the harder it is on your body, okay? So you start out at a lower intensity, okay? Everybody sort of understand that now? Okay, so, and that's why in that handout, you'll also see me talk about, say, in moderate intervals, I'll say 70 to 80% of your heart rate, 7 RPE, so the 7 of the rate of perceived exertion. And I put BPM, which is beats per minute, but that's when I will actually do an assessment on someone's maximum heart rate on a treadmill or something, and then they can have that actual number. So it's a little more scientific. So the easiest way is the RPE, rate of perceived exertion, how hard you're working. If you are working at a slow, easy, you need to be 5 or 6. Moderate intensity, about a 7, maybe 8. And then if you're high intensity, you're looking at 8 to 9 out of 10. Okay. And Lisa, do you suggest 1 fartlek session per week? Depending on where you're running and how you do that fartlek training, is an awesome way of doing intervals. But just like Leona said, it's unstructured, and it's a hard thing to do for the average person who's trying to get into running. But if you already have a decent base of fitness and you want to spice things up, fartlek training is an awesome way of doing it. I do it all the time. Just like soccer players, like we were talking earlier, if you played soccer, that's what they do. It's short, sprints, and then a slight jog back and a sprint and cut to the left. And
and I think just to clarify sorry to jump in, Donnie, but in case people aren't familiar with the term fartlek, funny sounding term, it actually I think it's Swedish, correct me if I'm wrong, means speed play. So essentially you're just playing with your speed. So you're running faster for a little bit, slower for a little bit, faster for a little bit, slower for a little bit, or walking for a little bit. And there's no structure, so defined duration for how long you work versus how long you recover. You're just kind of doing it at random or at will. So using things like, I'm going to run to that light post, or I'm going to run or sprint to the red car and then slow down and walk. That would be a good example of fartlek training.
Yeah, and Jarrett, you're right. It's sporadic sprints. Okay, it's sporadic because it's play. It's like kids. You don't have structured play for kids. They do what they want to do, and that's the idea. You go for a run to that, stop, longer run, shorter sprint, longer sprint, whatever you want to do. Tabata is a little bit different. Tabata is structured, but that's really intense, very, very high intense interval training. But years, it's just because and I'm pretending I'm chasing a soccer ball, or I'm, it's so for me,
I think Donnie is frozen, Leona. I think he's talked too much now. So
Okay. Donnie's exhausted all of his speak time, so I guess the computer's cut him off. So I can just continue a little bit on with this slide about incorporating interval training. So when we spoke about and asked you about, well, how do we bump up or ramp up our training? And we talked about adding time or adding distance. What we can do, just like when you mentioned the HIIT training or the high intensity interval training, is to incorporate intervals. And so that's just working harder for a period and then working less hard or recovering for a period. And I guess just judging by everyone's responses in here, you guys have been doing some form of interval training in your runs. And so common questions that people ask when adding in the interval training would be, how often should I do it? And you don't want to go from doing, your steady state runs and then going into interval training for every one of your training runs. And in fact, even when you're a higher level of training or you've got a fully developed training plan, you're only going to be doing that interval training 1 to 2 days a week, and you're still going to incorporate those days where you're doing your long, slow distance training and training maybe just tempo, steady pace runs that are a little bit lighter of an intensity. Because interval, hi, welcome back, Johnny. Because interval training, it is working at a higher level of effort, and you're still getting a lot of that impact effect. And because it is a higher exertion and harder on your body, we want to make sure we're moderating it and doing it properly. I guess just to ask you guys, do you guys know the purpose of interval training or what we're trying to accomplish with it? Like, why do we even do it? Why don't I just run faster for my whole duration or my whole distance of my run? Not entirely, no. Yes. Okay. So, well, the reason that I can't simply go from my steady cruising pace of, say, 6 miles an hour and decide, well, I want to increase my 5K time, so I'm just going to run at 7 miles an hour for the whole time. I physically can't do that because my body's not prepared. And you'll notice that too. If you try to sustain a higher speed for your full duration, there comes a point where after 2, 3, 4, whatever minutes, that all of a sudden your breathing's a little more out of control, your muscles are getting warm, they're burning, they're feeling heavy. And that's because you're working over your lactate threshold. So the harder that you work, or the more intensely that you work, your body is producing more lactic acid, or your blood lactate is going up. And our body can buffer or process that at a particular rate. But as soon as I work harder so that my body's producing more, or producing it more quickly than I can buffer it, that starts to accumulate, and that's what limits my performance. And so my goal then is to raise my threshold so that I can tolerate more of that lactate or process it better, so that my working speed can be higher for my whole entire run. And that's what we're trying to do with interval training, except we're just introducing that intensity and those speeds to our body in little bouts that we can handle, and adding recovery in interspersed in there, so that we're able to kind of do that on a repeated basis. And eventually, over the long term, that will help to raise your lactate threshold and increase your overall performance. So that's sort of the short version of why we're going to do that. So we want to look at, so how many intervals should I do? Am I going to go out and do my run? Do I need 20 intervals, 50 intervals? Like, what's a good amount of intervals? And for any of you who have done the interval training, it is fatiguing. So you're not going to want to start out with a whole lot of them. So you might decide, okay, I'm going to try between 5 and 10 intervals, however long you decide your intervals should be. So you'll do your warm up. You might do a little bit of a steady pace run for maybe your kilometer or your half mile, a couple of minutes, and then you'll go into your intervals. So working harder and then recovering. And you might be able to handle 5 of those, and that's kind of it. And then you're going to complete your cool down or just do a steady, slow pace for the rest of your run after that. Or you may be able to do 8, or you may be able to do 10. But generally, that is a good amount of time to spend on your interval training. And regardless of how long your interval is or how long your rest periods are, you want to think about that 5 to 10 minutes of work time. So if you added up all of your interval efforts, how long is that high intensity effort? If you've got, a minimum of 5 minutes or 10 minutes, potentially working up to 15, you've got enough effort time put in that you're going to see some of that effect or that physiological benefit. And as far as how long your intervals should be, a lot of times people will work in with, start with maybe a 30-second interval, do 30 seconds of work, and then they're going to do a recovery portion, and that might be equal to the work time, so 30 seconds of recovery, or they might do a minute of recovery or a minute and a half. You're going to recover for as long as you need to so that you can perform that work effort again without feeling like you're too tired to do it. Some people may do a minute-long interval. Some people might do up to 2 minutes of work effort. But essentially, you don't want to get any longer than that. If I can perform that interval for 3 minutes, 4 minutes, 5 minutes, I'm probably not working at a high enough intensity for it to be a true interval. So that third point where we're talking about what intensity should my interval be at, you're working at a pace that is above your sustainable run pace. So if I can cruise along at 6 miles an hour for my 5K or 6K, my interval is not 6 miles an hour. I'm bumping it up above that. It doesn't have to be a max effort. So when Donnie was talking about RPE, if I cruise along at what feels like a 6 out of 10 to me on my comfortable run, my interval might be an 8 out of 10. It might be a 7.5 out of 10. It might be a 9 out of 10. Or if I'm doing a really short, hard interval, it might be a 10 out of 10. But then I'm going to recover at like a 3 out of 10, 4 out of 10 after that. So that's what we're thinking about for intensity for intervals.
Chad, Chad had should I add interval training to my 3 runs a week, or should I replace one of my runs? My thought is that if you're only running 3 times a week, yeah, take your middle one, say a Wednesday, depending on what days you do, and make that your interval training day, because that's the one that's going to really kickstart your, like Leona says, really bump up your lactate threshold, and your fitness level is going to really get a big boost when you add interval training to your weekly training. But like Leona said, it's hard on the body, so that's why I would do it once a week right now. And to do it as a replacement, because when we were talking before about like the overall stress on your body, and we talked about using different activities, which is a nice segue to the next slide about cross training, is you want to think about that overall impact or amount of stress, especially repetitive stress on your body. So cross training is a great way to achieve that. So this is essentially doing other activities besides running. And so what that can do is just help reduce your chances of overuse injuries by changing up your movement patterns and changing up the stresses on your joints, because running is a very singular action movement or activity, right? It's literally the same thing over and over and over and over. So you're putting the same impacts and the same muscle actions and activation on your body over and over. So instead of putting those on your body even more by adding another interval day, maybe replace one of your run days and then add in another activity. So we mentioned before that some of you guys are cycling. Can you guys think of any other activities that you might want to include as cross training? Rollerblading. Yeah.
That's what I had.
I didn't know anybody rollerbladed anymore.
Swimming, hiking. Yeah, weights, not necessarily a cardiovascular activity, but we do have a quick slide on weight training as well and talking about that. So all great ideas. hill training, cycling, swimming, even things like doing, I go on the elliptical sometimes to give myself a little bit of a break from the impact of the running. We mentioned before, you guys play soccer, which is still running, but it's different movement patterns. So again, just like the next few points, you're going to be activating different muscle groups. So if I'm only continuously using the same muscle groups in running, but maybe not utilizing other ones as much in the run, I'll do activities that have different movements so I can activate them.
Randy.
I really hope somebody has a video of that for YouTube later. That would be interesting. And I hope he doesn't wipe out with those weights in his hands. The other thing quickly about cross training is that it does keep things fresh psychologically and avoid boredom. So if you tend to get bored on your runs, it's really great to just change it up and do something just for your brain that's a little bit different. So when you're cross training, just try to choose activities that are low impact or non-impact, like those ones that we mentioned. Thanks, Randy. That's really great. I'll get a video next time. When we talked about strength training, so that's mentioned by you guys as an activity, and I think we touched a little bit on it as well when we talked about, I can't remember the ones that said they were doing Pilates, but a lot of times people say they don't want to do strength training because they think they're going to bulk up and it's going to impact their run, but it's entirely the opposite is true, and strength training can really benefit your run for a whole host of reasons. So one of them is reducing the onset of muscular fatigue. So when it was mentioned before, like, I started doing Pilates and now my 5K run time really improved. So likely what you've done is built in some endurance in your muscles. So they're not going to fatigue as soon in your run. So you're able to maintain that form and that pace for longer, which means you run faster overall for completing your distance. Building some strength into your muscles will help you avoid injury as well. So I'm less likely potentially to tear or overstrain a muscle because I've got strength within that muscle and within the tendons as well, because there's a lot of stress that comes on the tendons along with that impact and muscle contraction. And strength training will help strengthen your tendons as well as your muscles. And having proper strength, not only in your exertion or the driving muscles of running, but all the stabilizers do help you maintain proper running form for the duration of your run. And if you've got proper form, again, you're just going to be more efficient and faster in your run and less likely to fatigue or to injure yourself because you've got incorrect form, and then you're, might be using improper footfalls or something and more likely to roll an ankle. So all those are really fantastic benefits from weight training. One thing that you might want to think about with your weight training for how often you're doing it is to incorporate at a minimum a full body strength training routine 2 times a week. So that would be hitting each major muscle group twice a week and focusing on sets and rep ranges that really target muscular endurance. So you're looking at the higher repetition ranges, 12 to 15, sometimes slightly over that. Florin, do we have any examples of strength training? We actually didn't create a handout for that, but I believe upcoming in some of our presentations when we talk about ramping up your training, we might touch more specifically on that. So
if you're familiar with stuff like doing a squat for leg strength, doing a bench press for the chest, doing a lat pull down, push-ups, absolutely. Yeah. Or lat pull downs for your back. If you just did even those 3, but you did, 2 or 3 sets of that, you're building up some strength. Like Leila says, it builds up the strength of not only the muscles, but importantly, the tendons and even bone density as you get older. So it's vital that runners do some strength training.
Yeah, and I did specifically label this slide strength training, not weight training, because it doesn't have to be weights specifically that you're doing in the gym. So things like push-ups, body weight squats, or any other types of training that are challenging your muscles and fatiguing them in those 12 to 15 reps are all great activities to help build that in. And I think Diane is advancing our slide along.
I noticed that. Yeah, I noticed that. Well, we were done at the end anyway.
Try
So.
not to move you on, but I am being cognizant of the time and not wanting to take up too much of everybody's time. There was some great conversation going on through this whole presentation, and lots of great comments. So I really impressed. If you've got any comments or any questions that you want to ask either Leona or Dawn, there are their emails. So absolutely, we'll get to your question, Jared. You can contact one of these people, and I'm sure that they'll help you, or at least to be able to direct you in the right area. And Jared, Leona or Dawn, do you want to answer that question for him?
Sure. I mean, what I do, Jarrett, is I use a polar heart rate monitor. I use a very basic one. I have one that's about almost 12 to 15 years old, and it's a perfect heart rate monitor for me. So I use that to help me gauge my run. So if I am forcing myself to stay within a moderate to low level, I'll use my polar heart rate monitor to keep me under control. I don't have someone else telling me slow down. So for me, that's what I use.
Mm-hmm. And for me, I generally, if I'm specifically tracking my heart rate, I do use like a heart rate monitor and strap, but I don't tend to do that very often. I go based on my perceived exertion, but I will use running apps on my phone just to track my distance and my time. So they'll let me know at the end of my run the distance I ran and how fast, and it'll save it so I can scroll back through and look and see if I've been improving and how my previous runs have gone. Okay. And if you look at the previous presentation that Sean did on tech, I believe he gives a few good examples of those types of apps that you can use.
And I'll go back to that slide so that you guys can get that information down. We'll just finish off the last few that we have here before we move on. So these are the resource slides. We show this at every briefing. So if you're struggling with anything around your mental health, please feel free. Please reach out to somebody. So you've got your Canadian Forces Members Assistance Program, 24/7, 365 days a year. Free, confidential, outside chain of command. You, your family can call this number. So please do. If you or somebody you know is considering suicide, please look at the suicide hotline number. Information about COVID-19, please go to the source. So Canadian government has the most up-to-date information on that. Family information line, another 1-800, 365 days a year bilingual service to deal with issues that surround being a member of the military family. You have your Sexual Misconduct Response Center, Kids Help Phone. You can call or text. The ARC line is all things COVID for the Canadian Armed Forces. So 2 polls and then one final slide, and I'll go back to the other one. So just wanted to know if you feel you can apply what you've learned today in your daily living. That's awesome. Great. And then
while you guys are completing the poll, I would just like to say I think it's awesome that we just connected 2 of you guys to become running and workout buddies. That's fantastic.
I know. I think that's amazing too. Absolutely. And then the last poll, how satisfied are you with this Demio platform that we've been using to deliver these webinars? Okay. Sounds good. We are looking at maybe trying something else with everybody going to Microsoft Teams. We might be moving to there. We'll see. But for right now, this is the form that we're going to be using. So finally, this slide, although it's very, very small, does have a list of all the upcoming sessions that we've got continuing in this series. So there's not one next week. In 2 weeks, we'll be looking at equipment to get you safely there. Then looking at hydration, nutrition, dealing with heat, tracking your progress, stretching, maintaining motivation, mental toughness, stepping up training, and injury prevention, how to deal with those setbacks. And then finally, celebrating the success. So if you haven't yet, the registration is out now for the Army Run, the virtual Army Run, which will be September 1st to 20th, I believe. I know September 20th is in there somewhere. So you can register for that race as well. The Navy bike ride is on right now, so you can join that as well and start biking for that. And I will take you to the very front where we had the slide of the recording.
Sorry, I was cutting you off, Diane. Florin was just asking if they're at the same time, and yeah,
Yes.
they're at the same time.
Sorry about that. They're all at the same time, Florin. All right. Any other questions? Comments?
I always tell people, if you ever have any questions, contact me. I love and try to teach. So
In
for
case
me,
you couldn't have told, Donnie likes to chat.
if you didn't already know, I could be here for a lot longer. So I know sometimes it's a lot for people, especially starting out, but and it can be confusing. But if you have any specific questions, you can either contact Diane, who could forward it to me, or contact me or Leona by the emails. So.
For sure. And Florin, yeah, as people are starting to go back to work, we may have to look at moving the webinars to the evening. Right now, we're still doing them during the day. So, but it's definitely something that we can look into. So we'll keep on top of it to find out how many people are finding it difficult, because you can't join this off the D1 or the CFMWS network. So if you're at work using the D1, you cannot get these. But yeah, we might look at that, Florin. Definitely. No problem. Thanks for bringing that up.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, Lisa, you can grab them from CAF Connection. I don't know if they're how up to date they are, but yeah, they do put them up on CAF Connection, and you can find the links there. Okay, see you later, Florin. Right, any other questions or comments? No problem, Jarrett.
Good luck in basic.
Yes. All right, so I am going to end this session now.